What if I told you that the brain of a serial killer is physically different from yours? Not just behaviorally, structurally. Brain scans reveal that the amygdala, the fear center, is 18% smaller on average in psychopaths. And the prefrontal cortex, responsible for impulse control, shows dramatically less activity. This isn't theory. It's hard data from peer-reviewed studies, including a landmark 2020 meta-analysis of 43 studies that confirmed these differences. And it changes everything we thought we knew about evil. You're about to uncover 10 neuroscience secrets that most people never hear. The number 18% is the first clue. Remember it, because it will reappear later in a way you won't expect. Dr. Kent Kiehl's work at the University of New Mexico has scanned over 2,000 inmates, and his findings are consistent. The psychopathic brain is wired differently from birth. This isn't about monsters. It's about biology, and understanding that biology is the first step toward prevention. So let's dive into the secrets that the system doesn't want you to know. This week, a new study from the University of New Mexico's Mind Research Network dropped, showing that brain scans can predict violent recidivism with 93% accuracy. That means we can identify potential serial killers before they act. But here's the catch. The same technology is being suppressed by legal and ethical debates. While courts argue, studies show that early intervention in at-risk youth reduces violent behavior by up to 50%. The clock is ticking. Dr. Kent Kiehl, who scanned over 2,000 inmates, warns that every year we wait, another potential killer slips through the cracks. This isn't just science, it's a race against time. The 93% accuracy rate comes from a 2020 study published in Nature Neuroscience, and it's been replicated in 3 separate samples since then. Imagine a world where we can spot a future killer at age 10 and intervene before anyone gets hurt. That world is possible, but only if we act now. The legal system is slow, but the brain doesn't wait. Consider the case of a young boy in New Mexico who was flagged by school counselors for violent outbursts and animal cruelty. A brain scan revealed reduced amygdala volume and low prefrontal activity. He was placed in an intensive therapy program, and today, at age 22, he's a college graduate with no criminal record. That's the power of acting on the science. Every day we delay, another child with similar markers slips through the cracks. The technology exists. The will is what's missing. You've been in this exact situation, watching a true crime documentary, feeling a mix of horror and fascination. You've heard the phrase nature versus nurture 100 times, but the real problem is deeper. The debate is framed wrong. It's not nature or nurture, it's how the two interact. And until we understand that interaction, we'll keep catching killers after they kill instead of preventing the first murder. Dr. Adrian Raine's research shows that a specific combination of genetic predisposition and environmental triggers is required. Without the genetic component, abuse alone rarely leads to violence. In fact, Raine's 2013 study published in the Journal of Abnormal Psychology found that maltreated children with the MAOAL variant were 4 times more likely to develop conduct disorder. This is the missing link that most documentaries ignore. They show you the horror, but not the science behind it. Let's change that. Consider the case of 2 brothers raised in the same abusive household. One became a violent offender, the other a law-abiding citizen. Brain scans later revealed that the violent brother had the MAOAL gene variant, while the other had the high-activity version. Same environment, different genetics. That's the interaction in action. The documentary you watched last week didn't tell you that story, but now you know it. That makes sense, because we're taught that bad childhoods cause serial killers. And it's true, many had abusive pasts. But here's what everyone gets wrong. Not all abused children become killers. In fact, the vast majority don't. So what's the difference? Dr. Adrian Raine's research shows that a specific combination of genetic predisposition and environmental triggers is required. Without the genetic component, abuse alone rarely leads to violence. That's why 97% of abused children never become violent offenders. The missing piece is a variation in the MAOA gene, often called the warrior gene, which affects impulse control. Only when that gene is combined with childhood trauma does the risk skyrocket. A 2008 study in Science showed that men with the low-activity MAOA variant who experienced severe maltreatment had a 9 times higher risk of developing antisocial behavior. So the next time you hear a story about a killer's tragic childhood, remember, millions have similar backgrounds but never hurt anyone. The difference is in the genes. Take the case of Aileen Wuornos, the female serial killer. She had a horrific childhood, abuse, abandonment, poverty, but so did millions of others. What set her apart? Brain studies suggest she had reduced prefrontal activity and likely the MAOAL variant. Without that genetic piece, her trauma might have led to depression, not murder. The 97% statistic isn't just a number, it's a reminder that biology is the gatekeeper. Here's what most people think. Serial killers have a bad brain, like a tumor or damage. That's the common belief. Most people think serial killers have brain damage, like a tumor or injury. That's what I believe too. It makes sense. Something must be wrong. But here's what no one tells you. The differences are subtle, not gross. It's not about damage. It's about underdevelopment. The amygdala is smaller, but not damaged. The prefrontal cortex is less active, but not injured. It's like a car with a weaker engine, not a broken one. And that changes how we think about treatment. This is the hidden truth that changes everything. Dr. Kiehl's fMRI research shows that the structural differences are on the order of 10 to 20% volume reduction, not lesions or tumors. That means the brain is not broken, it's just underdeveloped. And underdevelopment can be addressed with the right interventions. This is the hope that most people miss. For example, a study from the University of Wisconsin showed that children who received intensive cognitive training had increased prefrontal cortex activity within 6 months. The brain is plastic. It can change. The underdevelopment isn't a life sentence. It's a challenge we can meet. Dr. Kent Kiehl's team scanned over 2,000 inmates, including some of the most notorious serial killers. Their findings: the amygdala was on average 18% smaller in psychopaths. The prefrontal cortex showed 15% less gray matter. These aren't small sample sizes. These are robust, replicated studies. In fact, a 2020 meta-analysis of 43 studies confirmed these results. The evidence is overwhelming. But here's the kicker. These scans can predict who will reoffend with 93% accuracy. In 3 minutes, you'll see the one mistake that destroys even people who know all of this. Dr. Kiehl's work has been published in top journals like Nature Neuroscience and Biological Psychiatry. This is the gold standard of evidence. One of his most cited studies from 2012 in the Journal of Abnormal Psychology showed that amygdala volume reduction was consistent across 300 psychopaths. The data is clear. The psychopathic brain is measurably different, and we can measure it. The question is whether we have the will to act. Consider the case of a serial killer in Texas, whose brain scan showed an 18% smaller amygdala and a 15% reduction in prefrontal gray matter. He had a history of childhood abuse and carried the MAOAL gene. Without the scan, he was just another monster. With the scan, he became a case study in prevention failure. That's the power of this evidence. Another example, a 2015 study published in Biological Psychiatry replicated these findings in a sample of 500 offenders, confirming the amygdala volume reduction and prefrontal deficits. The consistency across studies builds an undeniable case. Dr. Kiehl's mobile MRI unit has traveled to prisons across the country, scanning inmates in remote locations, gathering data that would otherwise be impossible to collect. This real-world application of neuroscience is happening right now, and it's saving lives by informing early intervention strategies. The evidence isn't just academic. It's practical, actionable, and urgent. Think of the brain like a car. The amygdala is the brake pedal. It stops you from acting on dangerous impulses. The prefrontal cortex is the steering wheel. It guides your decisions. In serial killers, the brake is weak and the steering is loose. Here's the 3-step mechanism. First, genetic factors reduce amygdala volume, lowering fear response. Second, childhood trauma further impairs prefrontal development. Third, without proper intervention, the brain never learns to inhibit violent urges. A real case. Neuroscientist James Fallon discovered his own brain scan showed psychopathic features. Yet he never became a killer because he had a nurturing environment. That's the interaction. This case study, published in the journal Neuropsychiatry, shows that environment can override genetics. Fallon's story was featured in his 2013 book, The Psychopath Inside, and has been cited by researchers worldwide. So the mechanism is clear. Genes load the gun, environment pulls the trigger. But if you remove the trigger, the gun never fires. To understand this better, imagine a child with the MAOAL gene growing up in a violent home. Every day, his brain is bathed in stress hormones like cortisol, which further damages the prefrontal cortex. By age 10, his impulse control is severely impaired. But if that same child is placed in a stable, nurturing environment, his brain can still develop normally. The plasticity of the young brain is remarkable. This is the mechanism, and it's the key to prevention. Dr. Fallon's own case is particularly compelling. Despite having the brain scan of a psychopath, he attributes his prosocial behavior to a loving family and lack of trauma. His research, published in the journal Neuropsychiatry in 2013, highlights the protective power of environment. Furthermore, a 2018 study from the University of Pennsylvania found that children with the MAOAL gene who received supportive parenting had no increase in antisocial behavior compared to those without the gene. This confirms that nurture can indeed override nature when it comes to violence. The mechanism is not deterministic, it's probabilistic, and probabilities can be changed with the right interventions. Understanding this gives us a roadmap. Identify the genetic risk, provide a nurturing environment, and monitor brain development through adolescence. That's how we break the cycle. The biggest mistake is thinking that punishment deters serial killers. It doesn't. The brain's fear center is underdeveloped. They don't feel the threat of punishment the way you do. A study of 500 violent offenders showed that harsher sentences had zero effect on recidivism. In fact, the only thing that works is early intervention, cognitive behavioral therapy, and family support before age 10. Without it, the brain's window for change closes. This could be happening to a child near you right now. Dr. Raine's research also shows that nutritional interventions like omega-3 supplements can reduce aggression by up to 30%. That's the power of early intervention. A 2015 randomized controlled trial in the Journal of Child Psychology and Psychiatry found that omega-3 supplementation reduced conduct problems by 25% in children aged 8 to 16. So instead of building more prisons, we should be investing in preschools and nutrition programs. That's where the real impact lies. Consider the state of California. They spent $1.2 billion on prisons last year, but only $200 million on early childhood mental health. If we reverse those numbers, we could cut future crime rates by half. The mistake is thinking that punishment works when the science says the opposite. Here's the solution, and it's backed by decades of research. Step 1. Identify at-risk children through brain scans or behavioral screenings before age 10. Step 2. Implement cognitive behavioral therapy that targets impulse control and empathy. Step 3. Provide stable family support. The CDC's Nurse Family Partnership Program reduced violent crime by 50% in participants. That's 50% fewer potential killers. This isn't theory, it's proven, and you can support these programs or advocate for them in your community. That's how we close the loop between science and action. Even simple measures like prenatal nutrition and home visits by nurses can change the trajectory of a child's life. Use your voice to demand funding for these evidence-based programs. A 2019 study in JAMA Pediatrics showed that the Nurse Family Partnership reduced arrests by 48% at age 19. So the solution is not more punishment, it's more support. Start by educating yourself, then spread the word. Check your local policies. Are they funding early intervention? If not, ask why. There's a program in Chicago called Becoming a Man that uses cognitive behavioral therapy and has reduced violent crime arrests by 44% among participants. That's the kind of investment that works. We have the tools, we just need the will. Another successful model is the Fast Track program, which combined parent training, social skills training, and academic tutoring for at-risk children. A 20-year follow-up published in the Journal of the American Medical Association found that participants had significantly lower rates of conduct disorder and criminal behavior. The evidence is clear. Early, comprehensive intervention works. It's time to shift our resources from punishment to prevention. Every dollar spent on early intervention saves up to $7 in future criminal justice costs, according to a Rand Corporation study. That's not just morally right, it's economically smart. You now understand what 97% of people never figure out, that serial killers are made through a specific interaction of brain structure and environment, and that we have the tools to prevent it. But this knowledge is useless if it stays here. Share this video, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to join a community that values real science over sensationalism. Together, we can change the narrative from fear to understanding. Do your part. Start a conversation, support early intervention programs, and never let the truth be silenced. The 97% figure comes from the CDC's data on abused children who do not become violent offenders, a fact that underscores the importance of early prevention. Use this knowledge to advocate for change in your community. Check your local school board's budget for mental health programs. Stop accepting the status quo. The science is clear. Now it's up to us to act. Imagine a world where every at-risk child gets the support they need. That world is possible if we choose to build it. Be part of that change. Subscribe now and join the movement.